The early hours of a November morning in Seattle had that familiar damp chill, the kind that seeps into your bones. I'm Liam O'Connell, and at 41, I'd always considered myself a pretty grounded guy. I own a small, somewhat struggling bookstore in the Pike Place Market, the Book Nook. It's nothing fancy, but it's mine, and I've always found a sense of peace there, surrounded by the scent of old paper and the comforting silence of countless stories. But lately, peace had become a distant memory, a ghost of something I once knew. I was engaged to Clara, a real estate agent with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit. She was vibrant, ambitious, always on the go. We'd been together for 8 years, and while those years had not always been easy, I had thought that we had a good connection, a real understanding of each other's needs. But I've learned the hard way that some people are better actors than others. I should have seen the cracks in our carefully built foundation, but I chose to ignore them. Clara was a whirlwind, always impeccably dressed, always on top of the next big thing. I admired her ambition, her drive, but lately, that drive seemed to have turned inwards, focused more on her own success than on the success of our relationship. Her affection seemed strained, the conversations became transactional, and the intimacy had become as predictable as a used book. I had a feeling, deep in the pit of my stomach, that things were no longer as they seemed. One Wednesday, I finished up at the store early, hoping to catch Clara before she went out to some open house. We were supposed to be getting married in 2 weeks, and I was starting to realize that we had not had enough time together. I thought that if we spent the evening together, we could sort everything out, and then everything would be okay. At least, that's what I hoped. I locked up the bookstore, blew off a couple of calls from clients, and took the bus home. I unlocked my apartment door and stepped inside, and what I saw immediately destroyed any hope of having a peaceful evening. Clara was there, standing by the living room window. She was dressed in a way that I had never seen her before. She had a tight red dress on, a string of pearls, high-heeled boots, and some kind of see-through jacket. She looked like a femme fatale, not my fiancée. "You're early," she said, her voice tight with tension. At first, I thought that we had a dinner date that I'd forgotten. I smiled at her. I reached out to kiss her. "Give me 10 minutes and I'll be ready to go," I said, trying to lighten the mood. "Go where?" she asked, her voice trembling. I stepped back. "With you, of course. Wherever you look so good for." There was a pause, a silence that felt like a chasm opening up between us. "Liam," she said, taking a step back, "I'm so sorry, but you're misunderstanding." Oh, God, I've been dreading this conversation. I was going to leave you a note explaining everything. She gestured to an overnight bag near the front door. My confusion turned to a cold dread. "What do you mean you were going to leave a note? What's with the bag?" She avoided my eyes. "I won't be here this weekend." The fear became a cold, hard lump in my throat. "What do you mean, you won't be here? Where are you going?" "I just need to get away," she said, and it sounded like a rote answer. "All the planning, the stress, I just need a break." "And where exactly are you going for this break?" I asked, my voice getting sharper. "A cabin in the mountains," she said. "All alone." I took a deep breath, trying to process what she was saying. "All alone?" I asked again, my voice tight. It took her what felt like an eternity to answer. "No," she mumbled finally. "I'll be with a friend." My voice grew sharper. "Since you didn't name this friend, would it be safe to assume you'll be with a man?" Clara looked like a cornered animal. "It's not like that," she said, her voice weak. "He's just a friend, Liam. You've got to believe me." "Just a friend?" I yelled. "You're going to spend the weekend in a cabin with a man a week before our wedding, and you expect me to believe he's just a friend?" I was starting to raise my voice now, filled with disbelief and a growing anger. "What the hell is going on? Who is the son of a bitch you are going to be alone with?" "I need this weekend," she pleaded. "It's just something that I need to do." "Tell me who he is," I demanded. I was not willing to listen to any more of her lies. "It's not like that, Liam," she said again. He's just a friend that I've been talking to. Talking to about what? I demanded. About us? About our relationship. She looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Yes, about us, about our relationship. Is he a trained psychiatrist or psychologist? I asked. She did not respond. Is he a licensed therapist or counselor? I asked again and again. Silence. Is he at least a member of the clergy who counsels engaged couples? I asked, my patience hanging by a thread. No, but he's a good listener, she mumbled. A good listener? I shouted. You're going to spend the weekend before our wedding with some jerk because he's a good listener? What kind of twisted logic is that? I couldn't believe how ridiculous the whole thing was. Her head dropped even lower. Her shoulders slumped. Her mascara was running down her cheeks. The 2 hours she had spent preparing herself for her weekend away had fallen apart right in front of my face. Look at me when I'm talking to you, I said, and waited until she looked up. Her face was wet with tears. I will ask you one last time. Who is the bastard? Promise you won't hurt him, she asked, and I almost laughed. I promise I will find out who he is and make him pay, I said. That's what I promise. I was serious. I had never been this angry before. Clara crumpled to the floor, curling into a tight ball. She looked like a child who had just been caught doing something terrible. Get up and answer me, I shouted. She just kept crying, completely unable to speak. I slammed my fist on the nearby counter and knocked a vase to the floor. The ceramic exploded against the floor. I watched as she jumped, her eyes wild. This is why I was going to turn my phone off and leave you a note explaining why I had to do this, she managed to squeak out. I stared at her in utter disbelief. So if I had come home at the usual time, you would have been gone, I asked, my voice tight with emotion. She just nodded. And you were going to sneak away to spend a weekend with another man and just leave me a note. I grabbed my briefcase and pulled out a legal pad and a pen. I tossed them on the dining room table. This better be one hell of a note. Start writing. She sat down and scribbled on the notepad. A couple of minutes later, she stopped and put the pen down. I grabbed the pad. She had written exactly one sentence. I'm starting a new life next week, and I have to do this. My voice was shaking. Tell me the truth. Were you going to admit that you were going away with another man if I had given you more time? I would have explained my feelings, she said. You didn't answer my question, I replied, my tone growing colder. I would have tried to phrase it so you would agree that what I was doing was for us, to make our marriage stronger, she said. I laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. That's crazy. How could you having an affair make our marriage stronger? I didn't give her a chance to answer. People get divorced when one of them has an affair. Marriages end because of affairs. So do engagements. The realization finally seemed to sink in. The fact that I would actually call off the wedding. I couldn't tell you because I knew you would react badly, she said, her voice flat. Badly? The word sent a surge of anger through me. You haven't even begun to see badly. This is your last chance, Clara. I will not marry you, next week or ever, unless you tell me his name right now. The wedding is off. How's that for badly? She reached out and grabbed my wrists. Liam, please don't say that. I love you more than anything. But this is something that I have to do. I yanked my hands away. Give me his name. Silence. You have one last chance. Tell me his name, or get the hell out of my apartment and never come back. She started crying again. Liam, please don't say that. I love you. You have a real sick way of showing it, I said coldly as I walked to the front door and opened it. This is the last time I'm saying this. Tell me his name, or get the hell out of my house. She finally broke down, her voice choked with tears. Mark, she said. Mark Davidson, from the office. My heart sank. My boss. I could feel the anger swelling inside of me. That son of a bitch is older than my father. Have you been with him? She stared at the floor and did not answer. Have you been with him already? I repeated. She was still looking down, refusing to make eye contact. Have you been with him already? I screamed. She buried her face in her hands. Even though your silence speaks louder than any words ever could, I'm still waiting for an answer. You owe me that much. Have you been with him already? She nodded, a very slight movement of her head. That small gesture hit me harder than any physical blow. I stumbled back as a wave of dizziness washed over me. My heart was racing out of control, and I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I grabbed the counter to keep from falling. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. As I recall from the Christmas party, he's married. What does his wife think about him being with a woman young enough to be his daughter? She's okay with it, she said. She's been going through some personal issues, and she hasn't been able to have any real intimacy for a while. Did she tell you this? I asked, my voice full of disbelief. No, Mark did. He said that she's too embarrassed to talk about it, she said, not meeting my eyes. Why don't we call her and ask? I said, no. She said, Mark said that would humiliate her even more. Give me your phone. I'm willing to take that chance, I said, holding out my hand. I don't have his home number, only his cell phone, she said. That means the bastard is sneaking around behind his wife's back, I said. No. He respects her feelings and doesn't want to make her feel like less of a woman, she replied. I can't believe how stupid you are defending him. I can't take it. I screamed. I'm giving you the choice. Leave or get thrown out on your cheating ass. How dare you call me that? She demanded. What would you call an engaged woman who is sleeping with a married man? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. She didn't reply. She turned away and started muttering under her breath. I grabbed her shoulder and forced her to face me. I have one more question before you leave. Why were you going to spend the weekend with another man? She finally spoke. This is all your fault. You know that, right? She said, her voice flat. My fault? What the hell are you talking about? I asked. When we started to get serious, you admitted that you had been intimate with several women before me, she said. I told you it didn't matter, but after talking about it with Mark, it started to eat at me. I knew that eventually I would cheat on you to even things up. Mark said if our marriage was to succeed, we must enter it as equals. I just stared at her, dumbfounded. You're joking, right? No. He said that I had to do this now. Because I told him you said that you would never stay with a woman who cheated on you. We weren't married. So I would even the score and then never cheat again. Are you insane? I yelled. That was before I even met you. I have been 100% faithful since our first date. So, you staked our whole future on nonsense spewed by an old guy who wanted a girl half his age. No, it's not like that. We talked about it. And he made me see how unfair it was to me, but he never tried to manipulate me, she said. So, it never occurred to you that he had a vested interest in getting you to even things up? I asked, my voice laced with sarcasm. No, it wasn't like that. He only wanted to help us, she insisted. I laughed again, this time more hollow than before. Humor me. What exactly did the good listener say that would help us? He didn't say much, but he helped me think things out. He made me realize I'm entitled to have intimacy with 3 different men, so we can enter our marriage as equals, she said. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Entitled? What a crock of nonsense. Liam, she said with a sad smile, I enjoyed having love with a different man, but I love you so much. I'm willing to settle for one. Settle for one. I said, my voice ice cold. If this wasn't so pathetic, I would laugh. I could not believe the depth of her stupidity. I'm so confused, she said, tears rolling down her cheeks. It made so much sense when Mark explained it. It wasn't supposed to be like this. You're right, I said, my voice trembling with anger. It was supposed to be you and me, together forever, faithful to each other. How did you think I would react when I found out you were sleeping with my boss. No. You're twisting everything around, she said. Then tell me. I shouted, losing all of my patience. What do you think would happen when you came home from your weekend tryst? Did you think I would be a good little husband and thank the old man for being with my fiancé? No, she cried. I hoped you would never find out. I love you, and I never wanted to hurt you. It would be my little secret, tucked away forever. You thought you would go away for a weekend, just turn your phone off and disappear without telling me where you were going, and I wouldn't figure out that you had been unfaithful. She looked at me, her expression almost pleading. Even if you did find out, I knew that you loved me enough to see the fairness of it, and that we would get married and live happily ever after. Fairness? I screamed. The word set me off all over again. What is everything you know about me that would lead you to believe that I would still marry you after you had an affair? You used to say that I was honorable and honest. What happened to that? Mark said, she started, but I cut her off. Mark said, you are so naive. He's an opportunist who found a naive woman he could control. No, he's a very caring man who wanted to help our marriage succeed, she insisted. How many times have you had sex with him? Or any other man? I swear there were no other men, she said. Then, how many times have you had sex with him? I asked. Not that many, she said. 7 or 8. You were intimate with another man 7 or 8 times while we were engaged, and you think that is not that many? Clara started sobbing again. I did it for us to make our marriage succeed. Think back to that conversation when I confessed I wasn't a virgin, I said. I never told you I had sex with 3 girls before you. What I did say was that I had sex 3 times. Each and every time was with the same girl. We were going to move to New York City together after we graduated. That came to a quick halt when her parents found out. They sent her to boarding school, and I never heard from her again. I met you the next year. Since that day, I haven't so much as kissed another woman, let alone slept with them. She looked sick, finally understanding the enormity of her betrayal. So that puts you ahead 7 or 8 to 3. I shouted, I guess I have to find 4 or 5 other women to make us equal. How about your best friend? You always said you didn't trust her around me. Maybe your sister? She's not seeing anyone. No. Oh. Please, Liam, no, she begged, tears streaming down her face. Give me one good reason why not, I demanded. I'll end the affair and I won't go with him this weekend, she said. You have to understand, I made a mistake, but I did it for us. No, I said. You did it for you and only you. You are just trying to find any way out of this, and I am done with your lies. She was shaking. Please, Liam, give me another chance, she begged. I swear I'll never. I held up my hand. She stopped talking. What you did was pure evil, I said, my voice cold and detached. There is no us anymore. You destroyed that, and there won't be a wedding. Ever. No. Don't say that. I love you. I swear I'll never cheat on you again, she begged. What hurts even more than your betrayal is that you never came to me when you were having doubts, I said, my voice shaking. I don't know what I would have said or done, but I can promise you that I would not have told you to have an affair with a married man. Only a marriage-wrecking woman would do that. The silence that followed felt heavy and thick. Clara stared at me, her face pale and drawn. The carefully constructed world she had created was falling apart all around her. She made a sound like a wounded animal. Tears streamed down my face. I hadn't felt this much pain since my mother died. Then, she finally snapped out of it. A sharp knock on the door interrupted us. She looked up and said, "Oh, my God, that's Mark. I'll tell him to leave. Please, don't cause any trouble." I grabbed the baseball bat I kept near the door. "I'm not going to cause any trouble," I said. "I'm going to kill him right here in the hallway while you watch." She tried to stop me. "He's not worth going to jail for." "I don't really care," I said, my voice cold and calm. I have nothing to live for now. But if I kill him, that will make us even for the pain he caused me. She tried to call Mark, but the call went to voicemail. I opened the door, ready to drop the old man in his tracks, but instead, I was greeted by 2 police officers. I dropped the bat and let it fall to the floor with a loud crash. The officers ignored me. "Excuse me, ma'am. Are you Clara Hayes?" "Yes," she replied. "What's the problem, officers?" The officer stepped inside and closed the door. He said, "Do you know a Mrs. Susan Davidson?" I work for her husband, Mark. They looked at each other with what I thought was a very odd expression, almost like they were sharing a joke. "Is everything all right?" Clara asked. "No, ma'am, but about an hour ago, Mrs. Davidson murdered her husband in the living room of their house." Clara fainted, hitting the floor hard. I walked to the kitchen, filled a pot with water, and then threw it in her face. Her hair, once perfectly styled, now looked like a drowned rat. She sputtered a bit, then said, "Oh my God, Mark is dead." "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied. She shot him 6 times in the chest with a .38 caliber revolver, then reloaded and shot him 6 more times in the face. The detective said it was the most cold-blooded thing they had ever seen. I started laughing. "I guess she didn't give her husband permission to go away with you this weekend, after all. We need you to come down to the station, ma'am," the officer said, ignoring me. "Mrs. Davidson told a neighbor that she was going to kill you for destroying her marriage. We have 6 squads patrolling the neighborhood, but they think you would be safer downtown." Her face was completely blank. I knew in that moment that everything was over. "Don't come back, you cheating woman," I said as my voice trailed off. She let loose a horrific scream. The police half carried her out to their car. I watched as the flashing blue lights faded into the distance and then went to the liquor cabinet. I needed to figure out how my life had turned to crap. I took 3 stiff shots of whiskey. Then I opened Clara's laptop and began composing an email to everyone she had an email address for: family, friends, co-workers, the choir at church, everyone. I titled the email, "Why I Won't Be Marrying Clara Hayes, the Cheating Woman." I wrote, "If you watch the news tonight, the lead story will be about a middle-aged woman who murdered her husband for being with a 25-year-old cheating woman. I'm ashamed to say it, but the woman is my ex-fiancée. Yep, little Miss Prim and Proper Clara, who always looked down on her friends for sleeping around, is responsible for a 60-year-old man being shot dead. Yes, she was seeing a guy older than her father. So, now you know why I'm not getting married. Thank God this happened before I ruined my life by marrying that cheating woman. Because once a cheat, always a cheat. P.S. The police are hiding Clara because her paramour's widow is hunting for her to kill her. I hope she succeeds." I hit send and watched as emails flew off into the digital ether. Within minutes, my phone began to ring. The first call was from a local newspaper wanting an interview. I sent the reporter a few pictures of Clara in a bikini, and then I told him the whole story. Next, I agreed to be interviewed on the air by the local radio station. I spent the next couple of hours telling my story and dealing with the fallout. When I grew tired of it all, I took a break and began shoving everything of Clara's into heavy-duty garbage bags. I filled 4 of them and dragged them to the front of my apartment complex, next to the garbage cans. The next day, the local newspaper ran a banner headline, "Love Triangle Ends in Death." The TV stations also descended on my apartment complex. Each one led the evening news with a picture of the suspect, as well as a picture of Clara in a bikini and Mark Davidson's most recent business photo. It was pitch black outside when I decided to finish the bottle of whiskey. The next morning, a TV crew showed up just in time to video a locksmith changing the locks. Then, they watched as I finished putting up "No Trespassing" signs around the apartment. 2 hours later, the police found Susan Davidson sleeping in her car a couple of blocks away from Clara's apartment. She was arrested without incident. I was hung over when someone began banging on my front door. "Go away," I yelled. "It's the police. was the response. I opened the door and the officer said, "Mr. O'Connell, your fiancée wants to come home so she can explain what happened." "I don't have a fiancée and this isn't her home," I said, pointing at the squad car. "This is my home and it will never be her home. Please take her away because I might do something I would later regret." I stepped outside and pointed to the garbage bags. "That's everything of hers. I would appreciate it if you told her I will never forgive her, nor speak to her ever again. Never." I slammed the door and turned up the volume on the TV. I punched in the channel for a movie and sat back to watch a black and white classic. No one ever admitted to sending the pictures that tipped off Mark's wife, but everyone agreed that his secretary had a very smug look on her face when she showed up at the office on Monday morning. Clara became a pariah in town. She was, of course, fired before she even made it back to her office. With the owner dead and his wife's very expensive lawyers unable to prove temporary insanity, the business was sold to a hedge fund, which promptly laid everyone off and outsourced all the work. Clara's family and friends were united in their condemnation of the adulteress. The day after she testified in court, she packed everything she owned into her car and set off to start a new life. On her way out of town, she drove by my apartment one last time. A sold sticker had been slapped across the "For Rent" sign in the front yard. She stopped the car, closed her eyes, and tried to remember how it felt when I wrapped my arms around her. She wished she was dead. 14 months passed before I received the decree absolute, changing my status to single. Clara's babies were born, and they were not mine, which was a relief, as I didn't want to pay for the little bastards. Mark is still trying to get his wife to forgive him. Personally, I think he just wants someone to wipe his ass because he can't do it for himself anymore. As for Detective Brian Big Brain Miller, as I started to call him, he never found out who did it, although he did call me in a few more times for questioning. I was not helpful. There were a few things that I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him that my friend Stu called on me a couple of weeks earlier. I didn't tell him that she had opened the door to him dressed in a negligee and told him to get on his bike, or that Stu had hung around to have a smoke and call another mate when he just happened to see my boss pull up. I didn't tell him that Stu met me in Portland with a very quick motorcycle and that we switched vehicles, and I got home as my boss was finishing his worship at my wife's altar. And I definitely did not tell him how I explained a couple of the 10 Commandments to the old man, or how I rode to a prearranged spot, took off the coveralls I wore for the ride down, and then met up with Stu in a labie a few miles down a dark country road, where we swapped vehicles again. And that's the end of the story. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, please be sure to click like, subscribe, and share. I'll see you in the next one,